Hey there, it's John Chen. Good morning, everybody. It's 8:40 over here on the West Coast, and I'm just going to let you know that number one, it's not your fault. What do you mean by that? Well, my computer this morning started booting and rebooting, and it's like, hey, technical problems. I'm not immune, and so that's where you have Plan Bs and Cs and Ds and Es. And so, speaking of ABCs, we got some ABCs today. My guest today here is the author of an amazing book called The ABCs of Self-Care. All right, your guide to creating a happy, healthy, and more peaceful life. I have with us the one and only Sheri Betts. Sheri, how are you doing?
Hey John, I'm doing great. I love your intro music. It's got me. I can't sit still when I hear music like that.
That's fantastic. Little known fact that is an original song by Song Division that was written for our Engaging Virtual Meetings Conference 2.0. And it was written by the people who were in the virtual meeting. They all gave suggestions of the style and lyrics, and he wrote the song in under an hour.
Wow, that's incredible.
No, that's some talent, right?
Definitely did not know that fact.
Speaking of talent, for my guests who don't know who you are, who is Sherry Betts and what does she do?
Wow, that's such a deep question so early in the morning.
Well, maybe I should start off with, what beverage did you have this morning?
Right, right. No, that's fine. So who am I? So I'm an OD professional and executive coach. And I have spent the last few years of my life working on trying to encourage people to practice more self-care. Something that I didn't do as well for myself 20 years ago. And over the years, I got better and better and better and better. And I started seeing that my coaching clients were having the same problem, and so I wrote a book that both of us could read. So I wrote a book that gives the ABCs of self care, and it is a book to give you self care habits that you can develop over time to create a happier, healthier, more peaceful life. And my focus in my work is to coach clients on leadership development and how they can use self care to optimize their performance.
Oh, thank you so much. So, out of all the things, why focus on self care? What started that journey?
Well, I actually had an episode. It was about 20 years ago where I was I'm in a professional capacity with a company I won't name because it wasn't a good experience. And I was asked to work 24/7, be on call 24/7. And this was a professional position. And I was always answering calls and attending to the 22 professionals that reported to me. And I was traveling 4 days a week, going up one place and then driving once I got there. And then it was a lot going on. So I tried to do my best to do everything that was asked for me of me and more. And turns out that my body was not having it. My body needed more self-care, but I didn't know it at the time because I kept pushing. I just kept pushing past the fatigue, yes, push past the fatigue, past the migraine headaches, past the back spasms. And I ended up in a wheelchair in a meeting. And mind you, that I was, even though that I was going through all of this and I was an athlete, I was preparing for a 60-mile Avon walk where I was going to walk for 20 miles each day.
Wow.
And so I was an athlete, really fit, and I was practicing or training 3 days a week or 4 days a week, walking 15 miles a day. So I was in the best shape of my life. But yet and still, I was in this meeting. in a wheelchair because the back spasms got worse and worse, and they got so bad I couldn't walk. And so here I am, this fit athlete, getting ready for a big event, and I couldn't walk. So that was the beginning of the of the process for me, because I was at my lowest low. And I ended up going to the walk. I took a lot of medicine and used a back brace, and so I finished the walk because I was determined to do that. Because I'm a pusher. I push through, right? And so, so that was the beginning of my self-care journey. And I ended up after that job taking a year off and really getting in tune with my body, taking good care of myself, figuring out what I really wanted for my life. And I decided that job wasn't it. And so it really started me on a journey to taking better care of myself. And over time, I learned that I couldn't just push through. I had to, letter L, listen to my body. I realized that I couldn't do all the people pleasing that I was doing. So letter N, no, N-O became my new yes. And so I really worked at self-care habits that over time helped me mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, socially, and practically. So all of the self-care habits in my book address all of those things because those are the 6 categories of self-care that I learned was much more important than have an occasional bath or working out.
Yeah, so talk about that year. So, in that year, I'd love to hear some things that you tried that failed also, and then of course the things that worked. I'm sure you shared in your book, but I'm kind of curious, how many of us actually take a year off and experiment with all these different types of things, trying to find the right things. I'm just curious about what happened during your year.
Sure. Well, the main thing that I did was rest. That was one thing that I hadn't done enough when I was in that job where I was 24/7 on call. And so I learned that your body will tell you when it's too tired to do something. And I also learned that my mind would tell me when I was too tired to do something. You get foggy, and I learned the importance of taking breaks. That was one thing that I didn't do. I did a little bit, but not as much as I started learning in that year off. I also what I failed at is sometimes my thoughts weren't as positive. So letter Y in my book is yield to positive perspectives because sometimes I let my negative self-talk talk me into spiraling into a story that really wasn't real. It just, you know how it goes, where you start think one negative thought and then you spiral down. Well, that's something I failed at during that first year. And so I worked at I learned about affirmations, and I started doing affirmations to try to change that negative self-talk. That, by the way, John, I don't know if you know this, but we are prone to be negative self-talkers. That's the way our brain works. That because that was the way we protected ourselves when we were in primitive time. So we have to work harder at making sure that we put positive thoughts in instead of negative thoughts.
Wait a minute, wait a minute. So I'm going back to the message I gave at the beginning of this meeting, right? It's not your fault. So you're saying that this negative self-talk was like, I mean, is that when we walk around and going like, I hope I don't get eaten by a lion, kind of like
Oh
self-talk like that?
no, that was the negative self-talk in the primitive days.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, negative self-talk in current days is I don't think that's going to work. I don't think I can do that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm not worthy of having this job.
And that protects you how, from your perspective?
Well, it protects you because you don't have to challenge your fear. That's how it protects you. You don't have to challenge your fear, and it keeps you in denial as well because denial keeps us safe until we're ready for the truth. And sometimes we need to convince ourselves of the truth, which is oftentimes more positive, because anything that we think of, most of the time, it doesn't even come true. It's our own. It's the way that we protect ourselves from challenging ourselves to be better.
Yeah, do you feel that way that we're like I mean like it's trying to keep you safe in mediocrity, but mediocrity turns out to really be the dangerous thing?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And I didn't want to use that word, but mediocrity and complacency, I think,
Sure.
because I think a lot of us are numb to how unhappy we are. And I think most people are
Mm.
just existing in this life and not really, really thriving.
Yeah,
Um,
let's even delve into that for a minute because I've had this
sure.
thing too, which is like you spend half of your lifetime learning pain tolerance so you can get something done. Then you
Yes.
learn the other half of your lifetime forgetting that pain tolerance so you'll stop doing the stuff that you don't want to do that hurts you.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Exactly. So you have to feel the feelings and feel whatever is going on for you, emotionally or mentally, or oftentimes, um, sometimes spiritually, we're not in a good place. So yeah, I think we're numb, or we use things like alcohol, like drugs,
Right.
food, something that people don't talk about as much, because we're in this, world where everybody is beautiful, regardless of size, regardless of health, and food is a drug. And so a lot of people use food. A lot of people use shopping as a way to numb themselves.
Yeah.
So that shopping is a temporary, and Amazon just fed into that, right? Right. Yes. Amazon made it even worse. So shopping is another way that we remain numb. And or sometimes we exercise too much. Anytime you do something to an extreme, it can often become a weakness. So if you're exercising too much, then that's also maybe your drug of choice.
Yeah.
So that's how we numb ourselves to feel good, as opposed to being truly happy.
What's the first steps to recognizing your numbness or getting out of that? What do you do to help recognize the
Well, it's awareness is the first step to challenging any problem. You need to, and that's letter A in the book. So once you're aware, and just be conscious of one of the other things is being present.
hmm
So not thinking about the future, not thinking about the past, just focusing on the here and now. That present will help you to be more aware. And then you have to accept where you are. I say, don't beat yourself up. Hey, this is where you are. Accept it. Be compassionate with yourself, and then act on that awareness. So awareness by itself doesn't do you any good. And then if you beat yourself up about having whatever awareness, then that doesn't do any good. But it is important to act on that awareness and acceptance. Do something different, even if it's one little tiny thing differently. Let's say, for example, you binge. I binged plantain chips yesterday. Okay. So today I'm only going to have one serving of plantain chips. So you take it one step at a time, and as I said, I wrote the book I need to read. So I'm still learning. I'm
Look for
still
the coach for the
practicing the
things that we
chapter.
should coach ourselves on. Um, and that awareness. Funny that we just went through that. I'm in another group, and we're just talking about. I have a conference coming up, right? So in October 18th, we have over a dozen virtual speakers, and of course, I was kind of bemoaning how challenging it is and how much work it is, and then even without talking to the other person, like I caught myself going, "Oh, these are the things that I'm thinking about this conference." I said, "What if it was easy?
Yes.
What if you just attracted the right people?" Right. What if some really cool event. So I actually one of my other good friends, Thats Nguyen, who's a big advocate for like gratitude, says you should write a gratitude journal, like 10 things in the morning. So instead, I'm writing 10 things that'll make this conference easy every morning.
Oh, that's great. Yes. And that's yielding to positive perspectives too. So you're putting that positivity out there. So you're going to attract it back. So that's great. I think it's important to set though that's kind of an affirmation as well that it's going to go well. So I think that's a good habit.
Well, let's talk for a minute too, right? That like everything you said, even working out can be a drug, right? Can self care be a drug for self care?
To me, self care is one of the healthiest drugs you can take. And I want to make this distinction between self care and pampering.
Yeah, pampering.
So, yes, because a lot of people think, okay, well, I got my nails done, I had a glass of wine, I'm taking a bath tonight. That's certainly pampering, and I want to make the distinction between pampering and self care. So, pampering are those things that I described, and they're short term, temporary things that can help you self soothe. Um, Self care is more long term. It's more of it's a combination of the 26 habits that I give you in the book that gives you a cumulative effect of having more happiness, health, and peace of mind. And they are 6 areas, as I mentioned, that give you those self-care habits. So pampering, nothing wrong with that, and it's I encourage it. I do it. Um, Meditation, I consider a pampering way of living, and so I meditate every morning. And so things like that you do to help you feel better temporarily, but it's self-care habits over time that create a lifestyle and a mindset that make you happier, healthier, and at peace.
Right, like exercise, it's just a habit, right? It's something that you have to continually do. You can't like meditate for a week and then be done with it for the rest of your lifetime, right? It's a practice.
No, no, that's important distinction you're making, John. And you need to do it on a regular basis. And I know sometimes you can't do it every day. I miss a day here and there, but over time, meditation changes the synapses in your brain,
Mm.
so you are able to function more calmly. You're able to think more clearly, and it actually changes your brain. So that's something you want to do on a regular basis.
So let's shift to the virtual part. I would love to hear, Sherry, like how do you do self-care on virtual over the last 2 years? What have you been up to?
Man, I'm telling you, virtual meetings have saved me, because, of course, we weren't doing a lot in person during that time, and I wrote the book during the pandemic, and so, um, well, there were no book launches in person like normally would do if there wasn't a pandemic. So virtual meetings have been really, really important. I know to everyone. I know it changed your career and changed the direction of your career. So I think engaging meetings are have really made a difference. And what I do to make them more engaging is I try to have a Q&A time with with every time I talk. I try to make sure that there's questions and answers where people can ask specific questions about self-care and what are some of the challenges. I love to problem solve around self-care. Someone says, "Oh, I can't do more self-care because XXX," and I love to tell them, show them how they could.
What are the most common questions? And if you're taking Q&A, don't you usually see a trend with the questions? I would love to hear like what are some of the most popular questions?
Um, I I'm trying to think over time because I talk to different audiences, but I would say that one of the most common ones is how to keep it up. That's the main question: is how do you make self-care habits more permanent?
Yeah.
And that's why I suggest taking the book. The book is comprehensive. It has 26 habits, but it's each chapter is self-contained. So I recommend people start. with a few chapters. And I've included a questionnaire in the book so that you can prioritize which ones to start with, which ones might make the biggest difference for you. And I also have that online on my website, so that you can do it electronically. But it's really important to figure out, to prioritize the ones that are important to you, and then to do them. And over time, it's an cumulative effect, having a self-care mindset and lifestyle.
Yeah, I love that you're using Q&A, in your virtual meetings. Really, it's what I love calling speed consulting. Like I have people introduce themselves and tell me a virtual problem, and what they don't know, right, is that we actually go through and solve each of the problems, all right, one at a time, and that's the best part of it. I mean, that means like every program I do is different because that someone else is asking a different question is usually what is going on. Sheri, what else do you find? What has to happen in a virtual meeting for it to be engaging for you?
And I think you have to weave in questions, especially if you're doing a PowerPoint. You have to weave in questions into the PowerPoint so that you're engaging the audience before the Q&A starts. So I think you have to go in and make sure that you are you getting the audience to think about something to come back to them, so that there's enough what we call WIFM, what's in it for them, in the intertwined in the presentation. So I think that makes it more engaging. You're making it um, focus on things that they care about.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much with that. It's There've been a lot of virtual meetings. What are some of the unique or best things that happen in virtual meetings over the past 2 years? Probably things that like you didn't expect, but they're some of the best moments over the past 2 years that happen on virtual for you. I'm just curious to see what you have.
Well, if you ask the right questions, you'll get answers that could be valuable. And I had a virtual book club meeting with a group of women, and I was asking questions about. Well, actually, I was taking their questions and asking more questions about what they were asking questions about. So I was trying to make it tailored to them, and we got into some really deep discussions about why it's more difficult for them to take care of themselves, the other people in their life that can contribute to them not being able to have a true partnership, for example, where you share tasks,
Right.
or things. I don't want to get too far into that. I want to focus on the I want to focus on the virtual part. So that was the best meeting, because of the questions I asked, we got some really intimate conversations that were valuable for not just the person asking the question, but for everyone in the audience.
Now, questions is really a core part of coaching practice. So I'm kind of curious, like, how do you have like any systems or things in your head to formulate questions? I mean, what you did, asking a question to a question is what we call facilitator aikido, which is something
Yes.
you can take the question which is directed at you and send it back to them, right, in a different form. Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, I'd be curious to like, do you have a mindset or any methodology in formulating the questions that you ask back?
Well, in coaching, I definitely have a formula, because when I'm coaching, I'm trying to understand the thoughts and mindsets and beliefs that are underlying whatever story a person is telling me. And I always get stories when I'm coaching about what's happening. And so what I try to do is to ask questions to elicit what are some of the thoughts, mindsets, and beliefs that are causing that behavior, because the behavior is what needs to change. But unless you understand the root cause of that behavior, you're not able to really make any significant changes. So I find that um, that is my sort of formula for coaching, is understanding the thoughts, mindsets, and beliefs.
Well, I'd love to hear if you have a solution for this, right? Like, have you ever asked a question and had nobody answer? Like, all you got was crickets?
Oh my God, all the time.
I would love to hear what's your solution to that. Oh, here, wait a second. I think I even have crickets around.
Oh, yes. um, that that is the worst, to have to deal with that. But what I find is if you so uh, if they didn't answer that question, then ask a different question.
Hmm.
So I'm fearless in asking questions. I think that's one of the things that makes me a good coach. So if they don't answer that question, I give them a new question because maybe that one is something that they feel more comfortable answering.
Here's I'll share one of the tips that I picked up over the last 2 years, or it's called the invitation.
Okay.
And it starts out with a simple belief, which is the way you ask your questions, right, increases or decreases the odds that somebody in the audience will answer. Because all you really need is one person. But when you have zero, right, having zero is like the catastrophic, right? Everybody still
Yes.
loses. So we created. I learned this while I was coaching 6 or 7 people who were going to run breakout rooms, and they asked a question. It sounded something like this, Sheri, right? Like, what do you think about self-care? Oh, nobody answered. Okay, good. I'm going to move on.
Uh,
Right. And for you, I'm sure you started to answer the question in your head because you have content to deliver here. And then
right.
when I just said move on, you're like, oh, wait a minute. He doesn't even really want to hear the answer. Like, so what I've told people is like, you're training people to be lazy. Like, not
Yes.
now you're training people like, well, I'm not going to think, right? Because why bother thinking? Because you really don't want to hear the answer. So I'm just not going to do it. Right.
Yes.
So
Yes.
instead, the invitation says 3 things. Number one, what question you ask, formulate a question that they can answer.
Mm-hmm.
And also that goes with it is like I said, start with easier questions like what did you have for breakfast today? And then move to the harder questions like what's up with your relationship, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
then
I look at that.
so ask a question that can be answered, right? So, and again, start with some simpler ones. And then the second one is tell people how to participate, because especially here in virtual, there's like a bunch of different ways. You could unmute, right? You could raise your hand. You could go to chat, right? So when you what I do is I give two of them. One of them that like trying to get two of them that covers all the audience. So for instance, if you have your camera on, you can raise your physical hand, right? If you have your camera off, right? I tell people specifically the instructions. Hey, click reactions, raise hands, right? And I'll tell
Ah,
them that's where it is, so that even if I
yes.
don't, I won't assume that they know it where it is.
Good. Yes.
Um, and then the last part is sit on it, right? Which is sit in the silence.
Ah,
'Cause
yes.
number one, some people take more time because they're really thinking about the question, so I want to give them that time.
Yes.
And then the second part is that if you stay silent long enough, some extrovert will blow a gasket and start talking.
Right. Oh, yes, absolutely. That's a good one, and I forgot. I do use that technique quite a bit in my coaching practice. Absolutely.
The silence, right? Was there a coaching section around that, like in that silence of like
Yes.
learning how to sit with it?
Yes, that was part of my training. That
Can you
was part
talk?
of the my training through ICF.
Did you
I
did you have
took
challenges when it first came out? Like
oh,
I'm curious, like because there's a lot of people that nobody tells you like how to learn this because, and some people can't help themselves,
yes.
right? Just kind of like in that
Yes.
negative self-talk. Like if you don't recognize it, like if you're numb to like this whole thing, you
They
don't
can't.
recognize that you're not giving people any time.
Yes. No, you're right, and that is so powerful. I call it the power of silence, and it is extremely powerful technique to get people to talk. And oftentimes, some like you said, some people are just thinking, and if they're an introvert, they're thinking about what they want to say, and they want to make sure that they are comfortable with what they say before they say it. So you have to give introverts enough time to think about their answer. So that's part of the silence. But you have to train yourself to be prepared to handle that silence. But it's
And how do you,
powerful when you do.
how did you train yourself? I'm just curious if there's any techniques that helped you. Like for instance, I just start counting in my head, right? I'll just go like 1001. This is what's happening in my head, 1000.
Oh, okay.
I'm not saying I actually there's like I'll just sit here and I'll wait, right? 1004. I'll just figure out how long it takes. Anyways, that's what I do. I'm just curious if
Oh,
you have any other
no,
practice.
you know what? Once because in my training, that was part of the training. We had to actually coach people in the training class
Yeah.
um, to get my coaching certification. And so I had to. I just once I was taught that, I start practicing it. Does that make sense? It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh, but I think I'm a more patient person because it wasn't hard for me to practice it. And not to, not to say that you're impatient. It just it's just that it wasn't hard for me to pick that up.
I'll self-admit I'm impatient. Like I don't like waiting in lines. I'll definitely
Okay,
let other
you
people.
said it. I didn't.
I'll say it. Yeah, sure. I'll say it. It's fine by me.
But that's
Yeah.
good. That's good because if you know you're impatient,
Yeah.
again, that's an important thing to be aware of. Then know that you might need a special technique in order to create power, the power assignment.
Yeah. So, oh wow. Hey, we got questions. Our good friend Nicole Smith is watching. Um, you can explain that as what you are going to do, especially because of computer lag as well. There could be 3 to 5 seconds,
Oh,
lag too. So sometimes, yeah, if you have that delay for somebody who's got a really slow internet connection too, you need to wait because sometimes they're trying to participate, but you don't see it until a couple seconds later, right?
yes, yes, that's a good point, Nicole.
My good friend Nicole, she actually just was the karaoke jockey in my karaoke for the very first time, and
Oh,
she's an artist herself, previous teacher. Um, so Sheri, tell me why do we need coaches in virtual meetings?
why do we need coaches in virtual meetings?
Or maybe
Um,
do we need coaches in virtual meetings?
Well, I just think coaching is a really powerful concept because one of the things that we have to do as coaches, we have first of all, we have to listen. We have to listen attentively. And if you can acquire that skill to listen attentively and to really try to understand what a person is saying, that is something that is extremely powerful not just in virtual meetings, but in everyday life. If you'll find that most people, many people, I shouldn't say most, but many people are not um, generous listeners.
Whoa, whoa, yeah, that's a great point. What is a generous listener to you?
So a generous listener listens to understand and to empathize with the person that they're talking to. Most people listen to respond. That's the difference. So they listen so that they can respond with a story about themselves or something about their life, as opposed to really listening and try to understand you. Well, one of the benefits of coaching is that you have someone who's an attentive listener who's only focused on you, to pay attention to. We're very generous listeners. And so having someone like that in a virtual meeting, I think, is very valuable because that person's going to ask more pointed questions. They're going to be paying attention to what you say and then trying to process it so they can make sense of whatever it is that you're teaching them or sharing with them. So I think having coaches in a virtual meeting is important.
Yeah, generous listening is really a key part. In our culture, we have a phrase which I think is really valuable in active listening, which is what I think I heard you say is,
Yes,
and then fill in the blank.
yes.
Because it's amazing how many times, especially in a virtual meeting, I think is a place where you can be easily misunderstood, right? Just
Yeah.
like email. In email, right? If I say, hey, Sheri, we're going to meet at 9 a.m. The problem right now, right, in a virtual meetings is like you have no idea which 9 a.m., which day, which time zone, right? And so it's very easy for people to miss, right?
Hmm.
I'm sure you've had that where somebody missed a virtual meeting because they wrote it down on the wrong time zone.
Yes,
And
that's
again, and again, I think a virtual meeting is very much like that. So yeah, so we use a phrase called "what I think I heard you say" is, and it's a technique we call playback, which is I try and play back what I think I heard you said, and it's amazing how many people have challenges doing it. They're like, I didn't listen, right? Could you repeat
right.
that again? Right. Okay, I'll self-admit I was tuned out. It's like what you'll hear sometimes with people, and I've busted like top executives with it. It's not just, it's not just
Oh,
bottom layer. It's all over
yes,
the place.
it's all over. And some of the best leaders, I mean, some of the worst leaders are the worst listeners for
Exactly.
people and what they care about. And so, yeah, that in coaching paraphrasing, but it's really important to technique to paraphrase so that you're able to show the person that you heard what they said. And I also want to emphasize too, like communication skills. Virtual meetings, I've learned from reading your book, is very technique sensitive. So you want to learn the techniques in John's book because it's not something that you can freestyle. Um,
I love it. Freestyle.
yes, I meditation today. This guy was talking about the difference between Jay-Z and or is it Kendrick Lamar? I'm not a rapper fan, so he was talking about the difference between those two, and he said Jay-Z is a freestyler. Uh, and and that works too. But Kendrick Lamar has a lot more Grammys and accolades. He's not such a freestyler.
Super,
So
super side note, because I do think there's a part of freestyle which means you have to be present because it's completely improvisational. I would invite you to go see something called Freestyle Love Supreme. You know our good friend Lin Manuel Miranda, right? Who made
yes,
Hamilton? He made
yes.
a second Broadway show in 2020 called Freestyle Love Supreme. The show is not written. They ask the audience some things, and therefore every show is different. And the whole show is done in freestyle rap. They have some of the most talented people. We got to meet him here in Seattle. Like the guy said, he'd been rapping since he was 2 years old.
What?
And they can come. They
Wow.
produce a whole musical unknown. So I do think there is an extreme skill somewhere in there in freestyle, but and you got to be really good, right? You
Yes.
don't freestyle if you don't know how to freestyle.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Yes, and I don't encourage you to free virtual meetings. That's what
I agree with that.
I
You gotta have
avoid for
a plan,
sure.
right? Yeah, you gotta have a plan. And Nicole
Yes,
says in her 2 cents, right? I think coaches are.
yes, and you taught me that already this.
Oh, thank you, Sherry. Uh, Nicole said, I think coaches are needed to steer the climate and to model appropriate behavior. That was her 2 cents. What do you think about that?
Yes, absolutely. Model the listening, model the asking of questions. Absolutely.
Okay, what do you think of the future of coaching and virtual meetings is? I'm just curious. What do you see now in your next 3 to 5 years or more?
So you were frozen a little bit, but I think you. What is the future of virtual meetings?
Yeah, for coaches and virtual meetings.
Well, I think it's never going away. Never, ever, ever. So before virtual meetings, before Zoom, and before Skype, I did a lot of coaching on the phone. Uh, most of the coaching I did was in person. Now, with virtual meetings, you can coach anywhere. Some people say you can coach from Maui on the beach. If I'm in Maui, I'm not working on the beach. To be distracted. So, but virtual meetings allow a flexibility that I think people before were was a luxury, and now I think it's a norm. I think you'll see more and more meetings. I think team events more difficult online, and but yet I do virtual meetings through conference calls, all through conference, where the people are in the room virtually, in, for example, and I'm in Los Angeles, and I'm facilitating a meeting with that group. So it, doing all kinds of things to has helped us to do all kinds of things that we would normally not do
Yep.
and save the expense of staying in a hotel, as well as the energy. It takes a lot of energy to date in person, and so facilitating a virtual meeting is in a way good for your self care.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Hey, Sherry, where can people find you at?
So I'm at Selfcare, and you can check out my website for resources. The appendices from the book are there, worksheets to help you with your journey, and you can also purchase my book from there. And on Instagram right now in September is Self-Care Awareness Month. So this is a very timely interview, John, for me. And I am doing on Instagram a 30-day challenge where I'm people to do a self-care action every day, and I made them really small actions so that don't intimidate anyone. I'm into trying to be this self-care expert like I am. But you can find me on Instagram and join in that challenge.
What's your Instagram handle?
It's ABCs of Self-Care.
ABCs of self-care. Excellent. Thank you so much, Sheri. Again, her website is in the link here with that. Thank you so much for calling in from LA today. And everyone, think about what's the one thing that you can do for self-care today. Thanks again, Sheri.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, John.
All right. Hey, this is John Chen. We've been hanging around with Sheri Betts, the author of the book, The ABCs of Self-Care. Speaking of self-care, we have a conference October 18th through the 22nd. So if you want to learn even more virtual self-care and other cool tips and tricks like how to live stream, we're going to be doing that. I've got 12 of the top virtual speakers around the world. We're running 4 hours a day, 9 o'clock to 1 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, every day from the 18th to the 22nd. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this time with Sheri Betts. A shout out to my good friend Nicole Smith, who shouted out some of our questions here today that we got answered. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Self-care, everyone.
Drawing star people and keep old people. Show you got heart.